you're a counselor, administrator, or other staff member that may handle self-harm or student-related risks using the Managed Methods platform, this guide will be intended to help you. The areas you'll be focused in on will be fairly narrow to start out with just the Risk tab, but you may need to branch out to some additional areas to do further investigation as needed. I went ahead and clicked into View here to go ahead and take a look at the summary screen. The summary screen is the high-level overview of a lot of different elements, but we're going to be focused specifically today on the Risk section in the Risk tab. So here you'll see that Risks is the very first thing. If you were to click this more, this would take you over to the Risk tab directly, and any of the blue text here would directly also take you over to that Risks tab. I'll go ahead and click on the Risk tab here. First thing you'll notice here is the total number of active risks and where those risks are distributed. So the Managed Methods platform will be scanning within any drive files, shared drive files, Gmail, Gmail attachments, Google Classroom announcements, and Google Chat for potential risks. Additionally, you may be focused in on some very specific risks if your primary focus is going to be student safety, self-harm, things of that nature. So here you'll see a self-harm strict risk, self-harm ML risk, toxicity risk ML, and image risk ML. Those are, generally speaking, the 4 primary risk scans that you may have turned on to help with potential indications of self-harm, toxicity, or potential inappropriate or violent images that may exist within the domain here. We'll go through each of those risks in a little bit more detail and depth here, but as you can see, there's a number associated with each of the risk scans indicating how many of those were detected. If you do go ahead and take action on risks such as ignoring those numbers will go ahead and reduce, and that'll make a little bit more sense here in a minute. So we'll start off on self-harm strict and talk a little bit about what that specific risk is looking for and how this will operate. To start off with, if I did go ahead and click into this Google Chat here, you get some basic information about what's going on with a particular incident in question, such as who created a specific message, who was the sender on it. In this case, this is a Google Chat here. You can see the total number of messages, who the active users were in this case, because again, this is a Google Chat, and then the actual risk itself. Self-harm strict is designed to look for potential indications of self-harm, and in this case, it looks for specific phrases. So we can see here an example of that specific phrase in question. With any of these, you always do have the ability to download the chat, download the email, download the specific document in question to further examine it or preserve it if necessary there. The next risk scan here will be self-harm ML. In this case, the ML here is going to stand for machine learning. And self-harm ML is designed to look at the overall sentiment and context of the document versus just a few specific keywords or phrases. If I were to go ahead and click into one of these risk scans here, you may notice sometimes that risk scans may get flagged by multiple risks. So in this case, this one actually did get flagged by both self-harm strict here as well as self-harm ML. If I do scroll down to the bottom here, you can quickly see, though, here's what self-harm ML has picked up. So you'll see here a risk level and a risk score. With self-harm ML, there'll be 3 different risk levels of low, medium, and high, and an accompanying risk score with each of those. Again, much like on the self-harm strict, you always do have the ability to download the message body, download the specific information to further examine it as necessary. Generally speaking, with self-harm ML, risks of high or medium will generally be the most actionable potential self-harm risks, with low, generally speaking, having a fewer of those. So if you are trying to make a workflow, you probably want to start with the high-level ones and then work your way down. The next risk scan in question will be toxicity risk ML, again standing for machine learning here. This risk scan is designed to look at 4 different areas here. You'll notice here, again, much like self-harm ML, it'll have a risk level, in this case of low, and then again a risk score. This will also have 3 risk levels of low, medium, and high as well. And here you'll see the actual 4 areas that the platform is going to be looking for with any of these particular pieces of content. So the very first one will be identity attack. Next will be insults, which will be insults between 2 different people. Obscene will encompass both profanity as well as sexually explicit language, and then threats will be the last one. Moving on to image risk ML here. This one's designed to look for potential violent images or inappropriate images, which may contain nudity, within the domain here as well. With any of these, you do have the ability to utilize an advanced search here to quickly identify potential adult or violent images as needed, and then you can click into any of the images here to directly look at them, see kind of what's going on. In this case, this one will operate a little bit differently, with a very likely being what this will be looking for rather than a specific risk level associated with the images themselves. Again, as I mentioned, each of these various risk scans are clickable and you can dive into them directly here. We'll head back over to self-harm ML and talk a little bit more about the various actions you can take on risks, as well as looking at a risk in more detail and depth. So if I go ahead and click into this again here, in this case with this email, you do always get basic information on whatever specific risk you're looking at. In this case, you'll get a good idea of who things have been sent to, are things being shared with anybody, all those kinds of information which can be very helpful in broadening and understanding who might be involved in a specific incident question. In this case, if there were any email attachments as well, you'd be able to identify those as well quickly. There'll always be a red icon next to whatever specifically contains a risk. If we do come back over to the risk section here, you will notice that there's a couple different buttons here. With any of the machine learning risks always denoted by the ML, you always do have the ability to report things back as false positives. So if you run into an issue where something appears to not be a legitimate self-harm risk, toxicity risk, or image risk, you can always utilize this false positive button to report this back as a false positive to us, and then we'll use that information, randomize it, and make it anonymous to go ahead and retrain the models and get those improved over time here. Additionally, there's the ignore risk button. The ignore risk button is your way of marking an incident as resolved, or saying that I've already looked at this. This is something that I'm either not concerned about, or potentially, hey, this is something that we are already handling. So if you do ignore risk here, it will go ahead and clear this particular risk scan out of the risks here. If I did that, this 74 here would jump down to a 73. You also do have the ability potentially to take bulk action on risks as well. If I go ahead and click the check mark box here, you can bulk ignore risks up to 500 here at a time, or even share basic information via email if that is a feature set that your administrator has turned on for you there. And ignore risk scans is going to be the way that you'll want to go ahead and clear risks out once you've resolved the incidents or dealt with or looked at the particular risk in question there. That way you keep things nice and clean, and when new risks come in, you're not overwhelmed and looking back at old risks that you've already actually handled or resolved there. With that, we can move on to a couple different other areas that you may need to examine on occasion. One of those areas will be the policy violations tab here. One additional area you may have access to beyond the risk tab is the policy violations tab. The policy violations tab is a running log of all the violations of any of the policies that have been set up. If you do have policies around things like self-harm or toxicity and are receiving email alert notifications, you will receive those email alert notifications every 4 hours, and they'll be batched together with all the various incidents of those specific policies you are directly part of there, and then you'll be able to click in and dive into those violations in question, and they take you over to the corresponding place where those specific violations occurred. In this case, the policy violations tab is your running log and your reference point back to any of the violations that have occurred. In this case, if I did go ahead and click in here and search and click the drop down and click policy name here, I do have the ability to take a look at various specific policies that have been violated. So in this case, I'll use this self-harm risk in question, and I'll be able to see all the various violations of this particular self-harm policy. Any of the entity names here will be clickable, and they'll take you over to the exact spot in the platform where that particular incident is located. If I click the drop-down arrow here, I'm able to quickly examine what's going on with the incident in question very quickly. This particular information here will always be preserved, so if someone does decide to delete something or remove it from the domain here, you can always reference back to this to still get some basic information about what happened with the incident, and additionally you can then go back to your administrator and ask for them to pull it via Google Vault or whatever backup solution you may be running there. With this, you also see a policy violated column here as well, letting you know how your policy was directly configured. And then you may also see the specific user in question who was part of the incident, and then the policy when the policy violation itself occurred. This policy violation time frame you can utilize as a filter here directly to go ahead and look for violations that have occurred within a specific time frame. So for example here, if I went ahead and clicked into this particular time frame, I could pick and choose exactly what specific time frame I wanted to look at and quickly see those violations that met my specific criteria. So in this case, I went from 12 a.m. to 12 p.m. on this particular date, and I'm seeing that there's one violation here directly. I'll go ahead and actually now click into this violation, which will take us away from the policy violations tab and over to the Gmail tab in this case. So the Gmail tab here will provide a lot of good information into email, and this can also extend beyond the risks themselves if you do need to do some additional digging or looking for specific emails in question that you may be concerned about, or someone's asked you to go ahead and find there directly. With this main email messages tab, any specific emails that do contain some kind of risk here will be retained indefinitely, and then any other emails will be cleared out every 4 hours. Any emails that do contain attachments will also be retained in here as well. In this case, I can see the specific email that I have found here from that policy violations tab. I'm able to see the basic information about the email in question, see what it got flagged as. I would then have the ability to click on this to take a look at this specific risk in question, and then I could even go ahead and download the message body to further examine it, or go ahead and preview it here directly. One thing you may have noticed is that the false positive buttons are available here, but there is not a direct ignore risk button. So if you are looking to clear risk scans out, you still want to go ahead and utilize that risk tab there directly. If I were to go ahead and reset this search here and take a look at back all the various emails within the domain, you do have the ability to download or preview any of those as needed. Be aware that all activity within the platform is logged, so you will want to use that for correct purposes there. And then this is fully searchable, so if you need to search for one specific email that a student sent or something of that nature, you can go ahead and utilize that. As I mentioned, this does get cleared out every 4 hours unless the specific email contains some kind of risk or attachment. So that's why there is a live email search, which will allow you to do a live API call throughout the entire domain to look for whatever specific emails you need to find. So this can be very, very useful to look for potential emails that someone has sent out throughout the domain, maybe a student or something like that, that you need to quickly find and further examine as necessary, or if there's some kind of specific incident you need to do some further digging into. One additional area you may have access to will be the Drive Files tab, which is where we'll head next. The Drive Files tab here will get cleared out every 30 days unless that particular file contains some kind of risk. You can see any of the files here with the red icons will indicate that there's some kind of risk associated with those directly. In this very first column here, you will also notice that there's a person icon. In this case, these are all blue. These are indicating that these files were created by people that are part of your domain there directly. If I did want to go ahead and examine any of these files directly, I'd be able to click into them here quickly. In this case, I can see this is a potential image that has been flagged here. I can see who created it, who last modified it, the domain it ended up in, the owner of the file, as well as the file type. I can then also look at how the file is being shared. In this case, this is actually being shared over to a student here. And then I can see how the file is being held as well here too. So within the students, my drive here in the shared with me, and then in this particular teacher's folder that they have labeled as violence here. And then if I were to click into it, I can see this actually got flagged by the image risk ML here and got flagged as a potential very likely violent image there. One additional area that is good to always examine as well, especially if an incident involves multiple people or you're trying to figure out exactly how that file may have been shared or transmitted to various users there, is the shared with column here. The shared with column will give you some great insight into kind of what's going on with the file there directly. This blue icon here will indicate that this file is being shared with at least one person within the domain explicitly. If I were to go ahead and click on that, I could again see it was that student 3 in question. Additionally, you'll see a chain link icon here indicating that this file is being shared within the domain via a link share with either view or edit permission. The globe icon here indicating that this file is being shared within the domain with either view or edit permission as well. Via a global link share there, so throughout the entire internet, if anyone were to grab this particular link, they'd have access to it. So very powerful share permission there as well. And then this gold icon here is going to indicate that this particular file is being shared with at least one person who is not actually part of your domain there directly. Additionally, then you have the ability to download any of these files in question. And for any files that do have this blue person icon here and are owned by your or created by your end users, you can utilize this audit file activity. This will allow you to take a look up to 6 months at the history of the file and what's gone on with it here directly. This can be very helpful to go ahead and take a look at a file that might contain bullying or some kind of other potential issue here and get an idea of who is actually interacting with that file there directly. For any files that are outside that 30-day time window that you do need to go ahead and find for whatever reason, there is a live file search here, allows you to do the same idea to go ahead and find those specific files there, and then you would have the ability to download those files there directly to further examine them as necessary, but depending on what specific search criteria you did input there. And then the last area that you may have access to is going to be the Accounts tab. The Accounts tab is all the various accounts within the particular instance in question. So if you are in primarily a student instance here, you may only see student accounts here directly. This would be fully searchable and quickly allow you to look for any of the specific users in question. So maybe if there's one specific user who has some kind of various incidents associated with them, you could quickly go ahead and find that user. So in this case, we'll use the student 3 account here to go ahead and quickly look at the various things that have been going on with this user's account. I do have the ability to click into the account to take a closer look at some things if necessary, but the primary areas you'll want to look at here would potentially be the files area. If I go ahead and click on the files here, this will show me all the various files associated with this user, including those files that do contain some kind of risk there directly. So this can be very helpful if you do need to investigate one specific user and kind of understand, okay, what kinds of things has this user been involved with? Are there other things that we weren't aware of that may also be of concern that this user's host is the user storing within their drive files, or have they sent other emails of concern, or whatever the case may be here as well. So you can do a more comprehensive investigation based on just this one individual user. Additionally, you could go ahead and click into this user here as well if necessary. Most of this information will not be relevant to you, but there is a report button here at the top, which you can utilize to take a look at things like Google Meet activity, or even activity within various elements of the Google environment itself, such as Drive as well. And this could be used if there was some kind of bullying document or something and you needed to say, okay, when was this user actually active in Drive? What kinds of things were they doing in Drive? Were they participating in this as well too, if maybe they're involved with multiple different incidents there as well. So if we come back to the Accounts tab, again, the primary areas that you're going to be focused in on is going to be the Risk tab. The Risk tab will be your home of where you spend most of your time focusing in on the various risks, taking a look at various information and dealing with those incidents as necessary there. So that covers the various risks, the various areas that you may be examining here, and can help you give an idea of how to start investigating and taking a look at various information that does exist here in the Managed Methods platform to help you look for areas of potential self-harm or behavioral issues there. Thanks for watching this Managed Methods guide